Elizabeth Warren versus the big tech giants. Foursquare's creepy location game, the internet at 30. And is it the end of Jason's beloved Pixel Slate? All that and more coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 74, recorded Thursday, March 14th, 2019.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Find the right people for your business this year at linkedin.com/technews and get $50 off your first job post.
And by FreshBooks, the ridiculously easy-to-use invoicing and accounting software. If you don't believe us, try it free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/TNW. And by CashFly, give your users the seamless online experience they want. Power your site or app with CashFly CDN and be 30% faster than the competition. You can learn more at twit.cashfly.com.
Welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is the show where every week we talk to the people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Megan Morrone.
And I'm Jason Howell.
Shall we get to it?
Yes.
Last week, Senator and U.S. presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren proposed the breakup of big tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google. And then this week, Facebook responded by removing ads that Warren's campaign placed on the platform, and then quickly backtracking and reinstating the ads. Meanwhile, Warren has also added Apple to her list of companies that need to be split up. Here to talk to us about Elizabeth Warren versus the tech giants is David McCabe, who writes about tech policy and politics for Axios. Welcome back to the show, David.
Thanks so much for having me back.
So first, let's talk a little bit about the specifics of Warren's plan.
Yeah, so the plan sort of has two prongs. The first is to make it illegal, and this would require an act of Congress, but to make it illegal for a company to operate a platform and be a competitor on the platform at the same time. So a great example of this is how Amazon sells a lot of private brand products, the most notable of which is probably the private brand batteries. These are the Amazon basic batteries that have been just sort of a runaway success for them. So they couldn't, in theory, operate their marketplace platform and also sell those batteries under the bill she's proposing Congress should pass. And the second part of the plan is that she would appoint regulators, she said, who were in favor of unwinding some of the big tech mergers from the last really decade. So that's, Amazon Whole Foods, but it's also Google DoubleClick, Google and Nest, and then, of course, Facebook's mergers with Instagram and with WhatsApp.
So we've been, you've been covering politics and tech for a while. I mean, we all are rumbling about how some regulation is needed. Is any part of her plan practical?
Well, I think it depends on how you define practical a bit. I'll say this. It's both within the realm of possibility. This law that she's proposing, Congress could pass that, assuming the right political conditions. And certainly she has the power to appoint regulators that agree with her on these issues. But it's very complicated. Breaking up a company, so that's particularly the second part, appointing regulators who would do this. Breaking up a company, unwinding a merger is really hard. And it's especially difficult when systems are really integrated, which with things that have been combined for a long time. So, Google DoubleClick has been around for a while as a merged entity. That would be a really hard thing to break up. I'd note that the AT&T breakup took 8 years. That's a really long time. That's sort of a full 2 terms for a president. So what I would say is the things she's proposing are not impossible, but they are complicated and could be a difficult lift.
So analyzing kind of the mechanics around what this might lead to, and 8 years, wow, that's a really long time, but I wouldn't be surprised considering we're talking about Facebook here. If Facebook were forced to, let's say, for example, break apart from Instagram, what might that look like? Is that Facebook selling Instagram to like the highest bidder or whatever, and then suddenly Instagram is once again a competitor to Facebook? Could it happen differently than that? Like what are the possible routes that would take?
Without getting too much into the specifics, since I'm not an expert on some of the financial mechanisms that would be in play here, it would be essentially a spinoff, I think, is the idea, that it would spin off as an independent company, again, that would compete with Facebook. But this would be complicated by the fact that Facebook is integrating all of its messaging apps right now, or in the process of doing this. which sort of, as some people say in D.C., sort of scrambles the eggs and could make it harder for a breakup to happen.
And I guess that's my follow-up question is as they go down that route of combining these messaging apps into the service on a deeper level, then it becomes more difficult to break them up, or could that still happen even if things are fully integrated?
I think on a technical level, it becomes sort of harder to break them up, would be my reporting has suggested. I think from a legal level, it would certainly mean you'd have to make the case for why it's so important that you do this. But I don't think it necessarily makes it legally impossible to do so.
Yeah.
Now, some people argue that...
I just say my reporting doesn't suggest that either.
Okay.
Some argue that the Microsoft in the 90s, the attempts to break up Microsoft, all the antitrust case of the 90s are what kind of led to all these big companies. There was then an opening for these companies to grow and become the giants that they are. So do you think there's a possibility, that might not be the only reason, but that's one suggestion. There's a possibility that this could do, like we would just see this over again. We'd see, for example, then Telegram becoming the next big messaging service if you break up Facebook and WhatsApp.
Yeah, I think our reporting suggests that there's little doubt that the threat of antitrust action or antitrust action itself for big companies does create an opening conceivably for upstarts of some kind. I think a huge reporting question for us is what exactly that will look like. Because the truth is that even if this is a threat hanging over these companies, it may make them more cautious. That's what it did in the Microsoft case. Reporting on Microsoft suggests that's one reason that Google is able to succeed, as you said. So I think that that's absolutely somebody to watch.
I've read an interview with Warren earlier today, and she said in the interview that these companies are behaving like monopolists. And I've heard this before where they're like, yeah, well, they're behaving like monopolists. Is there a difference between behaving like a monopolist and actually being a monopoly? Or is that just to say, from our perspective right now, a lot of this seems like they're operating as monopolies. It's yet to be proven that they are. And I guess that's what the court is for, kind of what the legislation is for, to find that out.
Yeah, certainly one option is to go through the courts to kind of get that finding. A big debate here in Washington, though, is whether or not even the standards for what constitutes anti-competitive conduct are appropriate in this day and age. So right now you need to prove that consumers have been harmed, usually along the lines of price or often along the lines of a price increase. That's really hard with the free service, which most of these are. It's hard with Amazon, which consistently has lower prices than a lot of its competitors. So I think what you're getting at is actually a really significant question in this debate, which is, how do you define these things? And I think that's a lot of what's being debated right now. And how this turns out in a practical way for these companies will depend a lot on where those debates land.
So have any of the other Democratic candidates for president come out against these big companies? And I know Trump is he's a businessman, but he's also said things about Amazon and other companies about breaking them up. So are they all sort of in agreement about this?
Yeah, I would say it's a bit a question of degrees. I think they all have their different approaches, but I think by and large, Democrats on the campaign trail are aligned in that they think that there is a big tech problem in America. We've written about this, that there's sort of a requirement that they at least be able to talk proficiently about the impact of technology on American life on the trail now in a way that wasn't always the case. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of them, are expressing these kinds of concerns. They vary a bit, but, it ranges from Senator Warren's breakup plan to things just like Senator Kamala Harris from California, who's also running for the nomination, went on record with us and criticized Amazon fairly harshly. And Senator Amy Klobuchar, also running, has also taken a hard line on antitrust, says that there needs to be stronger merger reviews. There needs to be more money for merger reviews. So I think this is absolutely a field-wide trend, and it's not just Senator Warren.
Yeah, and obviously right now is such a big time for, what we were calling a while back a tech reckoning. Everybody's kind of looking at these companies through a different lens because of all these stories that we're hearing. But then we are also leading up to a presidential, election here not very long from now. Obviously, Warren is, like you said, she's put her name in the race for the presidency of 2020. How much of a calculated risk is that? I feel like at this point of time, leading up to an election, anything that a candidate does that is running for presidency is, it has to be somewhat calculated, right? Like she has to be doing this because she thinks it's going to help ultimately her chances of becoming president. Is that a bigger risk, or do you think now's the right time for this sort of legislation?
Well, I know she hasn't actually introduced this legislation. She said that it should exist, but I think that this is absolutely a calculated political move. She announced this plan right before a rally in Long Island City, which of course was supposed to be the site of one of Amazon's HQ2 expansions, and then they pulled out. So this is absolutely part of the politics of it. If you're running for president and you're a member of the Senate, these things do go hand in hand, as you said. So I think it's absolutely a political read that this is the right moment for this kind of messaging.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because privacy is one of those things that really cuts across party lines, especially during the Obama administration. It was, there were people on both sides really saying, trying to look out for our privacy. And so how do you think this is going to play out? Because she talks about one of their big problems is that they used our private information for profit. I mean, you hear that side. Is this really going to be something that somebody can run on without fighting against the other side who also agrees that our information should stay private?
I think we'll have to see exactly how the partisan politics sort out. But I think, privacy is an issue a lot of people agree on, and you can run on it as, and we're seeing candidates run on it as something that's just good for consumers. It's good for voters. It's an easy solution to a problem that a lot of people have identified. It's also an ongoing debate in Washington that might actually result right now in policy action. And so we'll see how that affects things. But lawmakers here are certainly trying to hammer out some sort of agreement that can preempt the bill in California, preempt the privacy law in California, preempt what's moving through in Washington State right now. So, this is actually an issue I think we'll see potentially movement on, which may affect how people run on it or don't. But by and large, the way it's been framed on the campaign trail is just as a thing that'd be good for consumers, protects consumers, and sort of a common sense, easy solution.
David, thank you so much for joining us. David McCabe writes about policy, politics, and tech for Axios. He has a great piece explaining Amazon's reach in Washington, so you can check that out too. And he can also be found at D McCabe on Twitter. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
After the break, Paris Martineau from Wired explains why one company thinks you might want to play a version of Candyland where the pawns in the game are you and your private location information. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. When it's time to make a hire for your small business, naturally, you want to find the best person for the job. And odds are that person is right there waiting for you on LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to get matched with quality candidates who make the most sense for your role. LinkedIn Jobs uses knowledge of both hard skills and soft skills to match you with the best people who fit your role. People come to LinkedIn every single day. They come there to learn and to advance their careers. So LinkedIn understands what they're interested in and what they're looking for, which means when you use LinkedIn Jobs to hire someone, your matches are based on so much more than just a resume. Your LinkedIn Jobs matches are based on skills and background, but also interests, activities, and passions. Matching lets you quickly get a group of the most relevant qualified candidates for your role. And that way you can focus on the candidates that you want to spend time talking to and make a quality hire that you are excited about. Customers rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires. Post a job right now. Go there right now. Go there today at linkedin.com/technews. And you will get $50 off your first job post. That's linkedin.com/technews to get $50 off your first job post. LinkedIn.com/technews.
So you remember Foursquare? I don't have it on my phone anymore, but I'm sure a lot of people do. I know Patrick Delahanty here in the studio does. It's easy to think that the once super popular location check-in service has maybe faded away into oblivion, but the truth is that Foursquare has merely pivoted in some ways into the incredibly lucrative field of location tracking data provider. Of course, the app was always tracking location data before, but Foursquare in recent years has increasingly offered that data in partnership with companies like Snapchat, Twitter, Uber, Airbnb, Apple Maps, and a whole lot more. Joining us to talk about the current era of Foursquare is Paris Martineau from Wired. Welcome, Paris.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. It's great to get you on. Thank you. So when you say that these companies rely on the location data from Foursquare, what are the machinations of that relationship? How exactly does that work? And when did that kind of era of Foursquare begin?
Yeah, so let's say whenever you're tagging something on Twitter using their geolocation, you'll go in there and somehow Twitter would know. They'd be like, oh, you're in World Trade Center here, you're at Wired's floor, or at Condé Nast. And how it would get that sort of information is that Foursquare powers that interface. Foursquare has this huge archive of data that shows. So basically, if I'm tagging my phone on, if I'm turning on the geolocation on Twitter, it's going to send out a ping of like, here's Paris's GPS coordinates. Here are the Wi-Fi networks that are around you. Here are the Bluetooth signals we can see. And then Twitter would send that data to Foursquare, which would check it against its huge archive of location information and place data to be like, oh, we see that there's, Condé Nast Wi-Fi here. She's probably on those floors. The Bluetooth signals that we're getting are match up with people who have tagged in at being at Wired in New York City and rank it. But as part of that exchange, Foursquare gets more and more data about where people are. And the same sort of principle applies to when you're dropping a pin to find your Uber or using a geofilter on Snapchat and so many more things. So
someone doesn't necessarily have to have, I don't have Foursquare on my phone, but I do have the Twitter app. And if I ever check in, that's information that goes back to Foursquare and enriches their kind of location data information to create a map of, this thing that we're going to talk about next. But that's basically how it works. You don't even need to have the Foursquare app or Swarm on your phone in order for them to get this data.
Yeah, you may not think that you're a Foursquare user, but you probably are. Foursquare's technology powers AccuWeather, a lot of different weather apps that can give you real-time notifications. On my phone, whenever it's about to rain, I get, in 10 minutes, it's going to rain, grab an umbrella. Mm-hmm. That's almost certainly because of Foursquare. It powers Uber, Apple Maps, Airbnb, WeChat locations, and geotagging on Samsung phones, their photo service. Foursquare's website even says if it tells you where, it's probably built on Foursquare.
Interesting.
So you were invited to talk about this new product with Dennis Crowley, the creator, their new product Trending. They were proud of it and wanted to tell you all about it, including this Candyland-like game that you describe in the piece. About where they thought that this would be something that everyone would love. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I last Thursday I met with Dennis Crowley, who's the co-founder of Foursquare, to talk about hyper trending, which is this feature that they rolled out for South by Southwest. It's basically like a real-time heat map of where all the phones are, basically. The real-time locations of people, albeit aggregated, so it doesn't show an individual dot for each person moving around, but a big dot if a bunch of people are at a coffee shop, and a smaller dot if not that many people are attending your South by Southwest panel, and so on and so forth. And Crowley was kind of toying the internet. He's like, oh, I don't really know if this is creepy or if people are going to think it's cool, but we'll find out. But obviously, that's kind of a strange position to take on anything that you're rolling out. But in addition to that, what I ended up finding was more interesting than the South by Southwest feature is this app that he showed me, which is kind of like Candyland. It's an internal game that Foursquare had created just for its employees. And so it's basically like Candyland, but an app, and the gameplay is dependent on the habits and location information of real people whose data has been turned into literal pawns in this game as it's been being collected by Foursquare.
And as we talked about earlier, you don't have to have Foursquare installed on your phone in order to be a part of this. Does anybody have any control as far as whether they're involved in this? I realize it's anonymized, but we also know that, I feel like I've heard many stories where, the data's anonymized, don't worry, no one can be located. And then later it's found out that it can be de-anonymized. And, then
most of the time when somebody says data is anonymized, sure, it doesn't have your name or social security number attached to it. But let's say if you had a list of all the specific places I go in my day-to-day life, there's only probably me that goes to my apartment, my office, and a handful of coffee shops and restaurants I go to.
Right.
So, I mean, in the case of this Candyland game that Dennis had showed me, so we were sitting in like the 8th floor of some building where Foursquare's headquarters is, and he pulls up the app and scrolls over to kind of a screen where you get your cards. And all of the cards, it showed Brooklyn Roasting Company as one of the tabs, which is the name of the coffee shop on the 1st floor. And he said basically downstairs in the cafe, there's 40 people. Like, these are the real people that are there. And he was scrolling through this list of first names and avatars. And it wasn't their real people's like real first names and pictures of them, but it was randomly generated based on their unique advertising ID. And you click on it and you could see, oh, this guy named Harry spends a bunch of time in Midtown, sometimes goes to parks, rides the subway, and like really enjoys going to like bars in Brooklyn. And I mean, they could tell that just from a random phone that happened to be 8 floors down.
And for some people, I think that is more creepy than knowing your name or picture. I mean, just people that don't really, they're not scared of their personal privacy, but they really don't want to be advertised to, or they don't want all those, things to be attributed to them, so that they're just fed all these ads. But at the same time, I mean, my 3 teenagers are on Snapchat and they use the Snap map. I continually tell them to keep themselves in ghost mode, which they often do. But it's definitely worth it to them to see where all their friends are, what party they're at, who they're hanging out with. Like that social information is very useful to them, way more than what they consider their privacy. And maybe that's a failing in my parenting, but you can see how that someone 10 years older than teenagers would think that people would also like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Snap Map and perhaps let's say Apple's Find My Friends tool are a little bit different in the sense that users in these cases are opting in and to these services, and they know that a specific group of their friends or family or people that they have chose are getting access to this data. But in this case, I don't think users realize, technically when I use, let's say, Uber, I do give consent to turn location services on to whenever I need to have an Uber come pick me up. It knows where I am. I consent to that because I want to use Uber. But what I do not realize, perhaps as the consumer, is that when I'm consenting to that, I'm also consenting for that data to be used by Foursquare and perhaps sold to another third party that will target advertisements to me by knowing that, I often call Ubers from a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Maybe I should have more coffee advertisements and so on and so forth.
Now, CEO of Foursquare, Jeff Gluick, has said that the company refuses to sell user location data. Obviously, there's a whole lot of money that they could stand to make if they went down that road. I mean, I guess the question of do you believe them? They're saying it, so I imagine we should probably believe them when they say that, because if they weren't, that's a big no-no. But would that make this feel less intrusive than it kind of does already? Don't worry about it. I realize this is kind of creepy, but we're not selling your data, so it's cool. It's just us being the people that have this information. Should that feel less creepy, do you think? I
mean, I think Mark Zuckerberg made the same claim during his Facebook hearing, saying, your data. Facebook doesn't sell any data, but since Foursquare is one of the biggest companies that has the most amount of this data in the world, they can license it out to people, or they can maybe allow other advertisers to develop programs using their data pool where it's not being sold to someone else, but it's still being used in a different way. Perhaps, Foursquare right now offers this service for advertisers where, let's say, if you want to see if you're selling dresses and you showed somebody an ad for a dress and you want to see if they actually, after seeing that ad, physically went into your dress store and bought it. They offer a service where you can see, okay, did this person physically go into the store? Which, Facebook, it's a service that these large advertising companies offer, but it's the same sort of thing where, okay, Foursquare is not selling your location data, but it is doing the same sort of thing you would think if it is selling your location data, that is giving it to advertisers and giving them this look into your life and your inner habits that you wouldn't normally expect them to have.
Right. 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Paris Martineau from Wired. We really appreciate you taking time to talk to us about this. I'm sure you're continuing to get a lot of feedback and everything around Foursquare. Has certainly been in the news last week. Where do you want people to follow your work on this and everything else that you're doing online?
Yeah, definitely check me out on Twitter at Paris Martineau. I post about all of my stories there and sometimes have good, funny tweets. So
yes,
I'd be the best one.
I can agree with that as well. Paris, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All
Bye.
Right, take care. So the web is 30 years old this week. I wish I could eat a cake, but I am not allowed to eat cake right now. And we don't have one, so that kind of spoils that. But the creator of the web has some things to say about where the web is heading, and we'll talk about that with Tom Merritt. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by FreshBooks, the all-in-one cloud accounting solution helping small business owners succeed. Spend less time on accounting. You don't want to spend all of your time on accounting. You want to spend more time doing the work that you love. That's the most important thing that you can focus yourself on. Imagine a world where you not only save tons of time each month, but where clients compliment you on the professionalism of your invoices, right? Like they see it, they're like, man, this person has it together. FreshBooks self-employed accounting software does so many things for you. Automated recurring invoices. You can log every hour with time tracking. All sorts of reports that are super easy to understand. You can capture expenses very easily. Categorize expenses to make filing taxes a breeze, which right now you'll be wishing you had done that properly. Run your business from literally anywhere. All these and a whole lot more with the FreshBooks mobile app installed on your phone. It kind of makes managing all of this stuff way easier, so you can capture your expenses, send invoices, know the moment that you get paid, all from the palm of your hand, and it really is that easy. They've done a wonderful job with their mobile app. You can also connect with industry-leading apps to level up your accounting. FreshBooks integrates with lots of the apps that you're already using and some new ones that you'll be happy to find to make running your business a breeze. Gusto, G Suite, Funbox, Stripe, Bench, and more. They're always improving and creating new features. Things like selecting multiple clients on the item cells, invoice details and payments collected, adding taxes to expenses in bulk, selecting multiple invoice statuses on reports, and keeping track of your item sales reports as well. That's just a couple of the new features that they've rolled out, and they have more always rolling in. So don't wait another day. Boost productivity with your team and try FreshBooks now. You can visit freshbooks.com/TNW and make sure and enter Tech News Weekly in the How Did You Hear About Us section. You'll receive 30 days free when you do that. That's freshbooks.com/TNW and enter Tech News Weekly to receive 30 days free. And we thank FreshBooks for their support of Tech News Weekly.
In an open letter published this week, inventor of the web, Tim Berners-Lee, said of his 30-year-old creation, quote, "While the web has created opportunity, given marginalized groups a voice, and made our daily lives easier, it has also created opportunity for scammers, given a voice to those who spread hatred, and made all kinds of crime easier to commit." Here to discuss the web at 30 is Tom Merritt, sci-fi author and host of Daily Tech News Show, It's a Thing, Cord Killers, and so many others. Welcome back to the show, Tom.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, Tom.
We thought we'd have you because you also are turning 30 years old this week. So
again, yeah. Every week I turn 30.
You don't look a day older than 27.
And I think Jason should be allowed to have cake for that.
Yeah. Well, it's been suggested that, for obvious reasons, that he should have pie.
Yeah,
Pie
even
Day.
better choice.
Pie Day.
Seriously.
Happy Pie Day, everyone.
Happy Pie Day.
So do you think the web is, as Tim Berners-Lee says, going through a prolonged adolescence?
I don't even know if it's prolonged, but it's definitely in its adolescence. Yeah, I really like this. Now, interestingly, 5 years ago, he wrote a similar post about the 25th anniversary of the web, talking about the problems of surveillance from governments, because that was the hot item then. So it'll be interesting 5 years from now if these are still the problems. But I do agree that he has identified, criminal use, things like harassment, malicious hackers, even state-supported hacking. That should be treated with laws. He called for a redesign of the web to change the incentives that lead to things like clickbait and fake news and all of that. But the really important one was to research and understand why we actually have this kind of culture of outrage that's caused by social networking. He said you can't just blame one government, one social network, or the human spirit. Simplistic narratives risk exhausting our energy as we chase the symptoms of these problems instead of focusing on their root causes. To get this right, we will need to come together as a global web community. And I think that's something we don't hear enough of, is that, yeah, it's easy to chase after whatever the outrage of the day is and say there ought to be a law, but to understand what about the web is causing that situation is treating the disease, not just the symptoms.
I hate to feel like pessimistic as far as, the comment around coming together and uniting and everything. But the reality is there are so many people, so many entities that have agendas that go counters to that operate and thrive and resist that, counter to that. They have so much more to gain on the other side. How optimistic are you that we actually have the ability to, as a whole, as all web citizens, come together on this and overcome these, this mountain of opposite forces that just feels so intense.
That's the trick, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I brought up the 25th anniversary post he made about government surveillance, because as we all know, government surveillance was solved. It's not a problem anymore. No, I'm being sarcastic, but it is a tall order. And Tim Berners-Lee saying it in his 30th anniversary post is not going to fix it. But it can't hurt. Yeah. And the more people talk about it and think about it, the better. I am optimistic that it can be fixed, that it's possible for people to finally, figure out how to route around this problem, because the internet does always route around problems. But so far, I'm with you, Jason, that if conditions remain as they are, there's not a lot of reason for optimism right at this second.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of treating the symptom and not the disease, and I get it, but I don't really understand how that would work either. I mean, and I think also reading his contract for the web, it just sort of reminds me of how the web itself was created by a lot of people who are very similar to one another, libertarian mostly, people who hadn't necessarily had the life experience where they would experience some of the hatred or just the things that we now see the web doing. Like the people that created it couldn't imagine that because it hadn't been part of their regular life experience. So how do we treat the symptoms?
Well, you find out, you look at you research what's causing them, right? And the problem is we all want the simple answer. We all want the story that comes out and says, Facebook has been causing outrage among people, so let's ban Facebook doing things. Let's have a simple answer. And the realistic answer is we don't know. We don't know how to stop it. And just banning one or another practice, as we saw with Zuckerberg's pivot to privacy letter, isn't really the thing that's going to solve it. The companies are going to move towards what they think keeps them from being in trouble with the public and governments and helps their bottom line. And so you need external academics and independent organizations and open source organizations taking some time to look at this. And there are studies out there that are doing this and finding out actually a lot of bots didn't change people's opinions, but what did change people's opinions was if they were directed into small groups, and redesigning how groups work and how membership worked seemed to have an effect on the extremity of people's opinions. You need more research like that. So there isn't an answer, but right now we have a lot of people jumping to conclusions and suggesting solutions without really getting to the bottom of what's causing them.
Yeah, it becomes a lot easier to see what the problem is and obviously not what the cure is. And I think ad networks is a prime example of that, right? Like the entire web, the money behind the entire web is so driven, so at its core dialed into the way that modern ad networks process their business online. That seems to be a big flag. If what you're trying to do is adhere to his contract for the web. We know the problem. We definitely don't know the solution on that, because pulling the rug out from underneath that really, at its core, means rewriting how business is done online. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and again, saying ad money is the problem, let's pull the rug out of under it is not the solution. But let's actually create some redesigns. Is when he talks particularly about that sort of thing. He says let's redesign things to change the incentive. Right now, the incentive is get to the top of search rankings and buy your way up to the top otherwise. And there are other alternative designs out there that you could try to use. In fact, Tim Berners-Lee himself is working on a project called Solid with MIT that would change the way ID management is handled in a way that would put you in charge of your identity and who gets to use it, and would entirely change the way ad systems work, because companies would no longer control whether they have your identity and what they could do with it. Again, the question is, can you get enough momentum behind those sorts of projects for them to make a difference? It's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to the argument that the internet is us and we're flawed? Like, we're both good and bad, and the internet just reflects that, and the end. What do you say to that?
I'm right with you up until the end. The internet is us. And yet we change. The problems that folks had with television are not the same problems that they had in the 1960s today. So the problems that people had with comic books in the 1950s, not the same problems they have with comic books today. We as a society are learning how to use a new tool. And anytime an adolescent learns how to use a new tool, Megan, I know you know this, it's not pretty.
Yeah, they start smashing it on the table and seeing how they can break it before.
Well, that's more. Then we're more in the toddler stage. I think. Are we still in the toddler?
I don't think it's smashing it on the table. I think we are more adolescents, where you're like, watch where you point that. No, that's not how you use that. Slow down. You know,
or let's experiment with this
to your actions.
And that.
Yeah, don't run with scissors.
The internet's prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, is what you're saying.
Right. It's very risk-taking, but not risk-adverse.
Okay.
Berners-Lee should be very proud of what he's done. Obviously, 30 years of this technology that has literally changed the foundation of how the world works is something to be really, really proud of, I think. And no one could have, in his position 30 years ago, created something and known what it would lead to. For all the good, there's also a mixture of bad in there. But how do you think he really feels, like at his core, about this technology, his baby, 30 years later? Like, do you think he has regrets about creating it, or do you think he's hopeful for where it's headed?
I mean, honestly, you asked Tim Berners-Lee. I don't know. From the tone of his post, it feels like he still believes in it as a good thing. And he points out at the very beginning, he's like, don't forget all of the things that we used to have to do on our own. 30 years ago, we had to put stamps on envelopes if we wanted to talk to anyone who wasn't, nearby or use a phone. Answers to questions meant going to an encyclopedia or a library. Shopping meant leaving the house. Breaking news was delivered to your doorstep or on a TV channel. So the web, we sort of, as humanity, we sort of discount the things we get used to. We're used to all the good things the web has, and we focus on the bad things. So I think he's still pretty proud of what he has helped bring about. On the other hand, most of his letter is addressing the things that are wrong, and he thinks they can be solved. So I would guess he is not content with the state of it, but hopeful. It seems to be
cautiously
the tone.
optimistic.
Yeah.
So Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp were down yesterday, and I was.
Were they?
I know, exactly. You tweeted, like, I didn't really notice. I saw it on Twitter, and I was like, oh, and then, I was looking at Instagram and seeing things didn't seem to be updating, and I was kind of happy. Like, I was like, fine. I wish Facebook were always down, because I don't like it, and I only go there because I have to sometimes. And I mean, you said you said let's not blame Facebook. That's not the problem. Getting rid of Facebook isn't the problem. But I mean, can we make anything of the fact that, all of us were like, oh, Facebook was down, so what?
Well, first of all, I didn't say don't blame Facebook. I said let's blame them for the correct things, the things they're actually responsible for, which is not always what is happening. But yesterday I knew Facebook was having problems because I saw it in my RSS feeds. I did not experience it. Now, I'm unusual. I use Facebook very little. However, I do, use it a tiny bit. I definitely checked Instagram yesterday and didn't notice it was down. I guess the moment I checked it, I lucked out and got something to load. I don't message on WhatsApp a lot, so I'm not a typical user, which is why I posted that on Twitter saying, I'm probably the exception to the rule, but it didn't impact my life at all. And covering technology news for more than 10 years now, I often see these stories about outages, and they make great headlines and almost never impact people's actual lives. So I was curious if people would come back to me and say, as the internet is not hesitant to do, you're wrong. And I didn't get that. Now, it's an unscientific sample, but the people who responded to me were mostly, I didn't notice either, or I did notice, but it didn't really matter to me.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. You must be the only 30-year-old that still uses RSS feeds, still reads as RSS
Yeah, I'm trying to bring it back.
Yeah.
Retro tech.
Yeah.
And really, haven't you been covering tech news for like 2 decades almost? Or are you talking about, like, you wouldn't count your tech TV days as covering
Megan,
tech news?
I said more than 10 years because I didn't want to have to do math.
Okay. Okay.
We do math here all the time.
But
sorry, we should put that in the email.
20 years in September.
Okay, good.
No
So
one's
you
counting.
started when you were 10. That's amazing.
I know. I was a prodigy.
Tom Merritt is a prodigy.
Yes.
Really.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Tom Merritt is the author of the many sci-fi books that you could read right now, including Trigger, Pilot X, Citadel, and most recently, Gallium. I'm pronouncing that correctly, right? Gallium.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He's also the host of Sword and Laser, Daily Tech News Show, Current Geek, Cord Killers. I couldn't name them all. We don't have time because there's so many others. And of course, you can find out everything that he's doing at tommerritt.com. Thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
Tom Merritt, how are you so cool? How are you able to do all this stuff?
I'm not. But thank you. It's very nice of you to say.
Thank you, Tom. Always great to see you.
All right. Take care, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. All right, coming up, our story of the week. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by CashFly. You can give your users the seamless online experience that they want by powering your site or your app with CashFly CDN. You'll be 30% faster than the competition when you do that. No matter what industry your business is in, if your website is directly tied to company revenue, you can give your customers the fast downloads that they need with CashFly. CashFly CDN delivers rich media content up to 10 times faster than traditional delivery methods, up to 30% faster than other major CDNs. It's backed by a 100% SLA. CashFly guarantees the best user experience for all your customers, no matter where they are or what device they happen to be on. You can join the thousands of users who trust CashFly's reliable network, including LG, Microsoft, Adobe, and Ars Technica. Leo, of course, we've been using CashFly for years. Leo says that we've been hosting all our podcasts, audio and video, all of our media on CashFly for nearly a decade. Every month, our viewers and listeners download literally petabytes of data, and that's fast, it's flawless. Twit simply would not exist without CashFly. Say goodbye to logging in multiple times a week, or worse, even daily, just trying to track your CDN usage. There's no billing spikes, so you get a custom plan tailored to your CDN needs based on yearly usage trends. On average, customers who switch to CashFly will save more than 20%. And just imagine what you could do with that 20%. And by the way, your time, which is actually very, very valuable. And just for Twit listeners, CashFly is giving away a complimentary detailed analysis of your current CDN bill and your usage trends. You can see if you're overpaying 20% or more for CDN, and learn more. Check it out for yourself at twit.cashfly.com. That's twit.cashfly.com. We hope that you'll do that, and we thank CashFly for their support of Tech News Weekly. Oops. Google did it again. Google brought Rick Osterloh, formerly of Motorola, in to head the newly defined hardware division in an effort to bolster its own internal hardware offerings a few years back. And we've seen the Pixel phones do reasonably well. Pixel books and slates, on the other hand, regularly get called out as being too expensive for what they are, web browsing computers. Note that I actually adore my Pixel book. I'm not using it right now. I'm using the Slate, which I think is also neat, but I actually really love the Pixel book. I'm somewhat torn on this anyhow. Business Insider ran a report this week that claimed that Google was letting a number of its employees in that tablet and laptop division go, asking them to search for new jobs within the company, which is often what Google does when they're shuttering things. They just move them somewhere else, move the team to new seats instead of actually canning them outright, which is good. That's great. They get put to work in other places. The problem is that this kind of reduction in staff is going to undoubtedly result in paring down on planned products that they might have in the pipeline to be released. The report even mentions that Google had a, quote, bunch of stuff in the works. So who knows how this is going to affect the release of those products, but it's just like it's hard to know with Google anymore what's safe, because nothing feels safe with Google when it comes to products. And even when it comes to services, you just don't really know whether it's okay to like jump in, invest your money in it, invest your time in it, because it could just go away right before your very eyes.
Well, they're not going to take that from you.
They better not.
What if they're saying that is so perfect they don't need to create another one?
I don't think that's what they're saying.
I don't think that's what they're saying either. Does this mean anything for the Pixel? I mean, the Pixel is still doing well, right?
Yeah, based on the report, it doesn't sound like it means anything for the Pixel, and that would be a really surprising thing for them to do an about face on the Pixel. I think that's something that's actually working for them. The Chromebooks, though, the level of the Chromebooks that they're putting out often are way more expensive than the majority of Chromebooks out there. And I think personally, I think Google's always fighting against that kind of public perception of, oh, well, it's a web browser. Why should I pay more than $200 or $300 for it? If anyone really thinks a Chromebook, they often have a hard time considering paying more than $200 to $300 for it, because there's so many of them out there that do that. And I mean, personally, like, I love my Pixel Book. Did I pay for it cash out of hand? No, I didn't. Twit bought it for me. And if I was paying cash out of hand, if I had to pay more than $1,000 for that device, as much as I love it, I'd still have to, kind of come to terms with that and be like, well, I don't know. Is it worth $1,000 or more? But I do love it, so I'm torn.
And meanwhile, I mean, we compared, we switched devices. You took my iPad, I took your Pixel Slate. And I think that was interesting because, I mean, arguably the Pixel Slate can do a lot more than what the iPad can do, and it's around the same price, but I still prefer the iPad. And I think that there's just not, there's not a huge market of people who say, like, I cannot live without my iPad. But there's still a lot of people buying iPads, just because it's something they want. And they're willing to spend, $400, $500, $600, $700, $800, $900, depending, or up on that. It's sort of a luxury device. And I feel like Apple, for better or for worse, still has that market. So, there's certainly lots of people who like, who like the idea of Android running on a PC-like device, but there's not enough.
Yeah, apparently there's not. And obviously, Google has not made an official public comment on this yet. This was a report of Business Insider. Next week, next Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday the 19th.
Google has an announcement that they're doing at the Game Developers Conference. Actually, Leo and I will be covering that live. I think it starts at 11 a.m. Pacific, if I'm not mistaken. I should have written that down. But anyways, check our calendar, and you can see us kind of covering that live, which is to say that Google often has its new BFF, its new thing that it's really excited about. And with Google, I've just become, over the years, really used to the fact that it's okay with killing its darlings to make room for its next darling, which over time, year after year, Inbox is going away, Allo, Google Plus, those are all being axed this month. And I'm not saying that it's a bad idea for Google to do that. They're a business. They've got to get rid of things that aren't working to make room for things that are. But as a consumer, it makes it, every time it happens, it makes it more and more difficult to rationalize with yourself and say, I'm willing to invest in this because I feel confident that Google is going to stick behind it. At this point, you just don't really know. It's a total crapshoot, and that's hard.
So you're having trust issues with Google.
I'm having trust issues with Google.
I see that.
Google and I are going to have to go into therapy and really work on this. So Google, I hope you're ready.
Well, they have to be a willing partner, and I don't know. Yeah. So we skipped over the GDC announcement. That's going to be a Google, like a game console from Google?
That's what everybody's thinking, which could go a number of ways. Like Project Stream is something they've been testing that's turning basically any Chrome browser into a game system by streaming like Assassin's Creed, what I think was the test example, over the internet. You know, just it's basically live game streaming to your display. So really, all you need is a display and a Bluetooth, connection and a piece of hardware to connect a controller to. They could be unveiling an actual console. They could be unveiling a version of the Chromecast that supports this, like maybe like a higher end Chromecast dongle. They could just be saying that, hey, you have a Chromecast? By the way, it has a Bluetooth capability inside of it. Boom, you have a console now. They could go a number of different directions. But yeah, obviously it has something to do with gaming, and that's kind of where the clues are pointing.
Has Google done anything with gaming in the past?
With gaming in the past?
Yeah.
I mean, not
besides playing with your heart.
Yeah, that's been a game that's been ongoing for more than 10 years now. No clue who's won yet.
Okay.
we're equal competitors in that regard. I don't think that they've necessarily done anything official like this. You know what I mean? Like they've supported gaming systems. If you remember the Ouya, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. That Android manufacturers, let's say, have come in and had like game console in mind running on Android. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily what Google is talking about here. I don't even think it has anything to do with Android, but who knows? And I guess we'll find out because it's, just right around the corner. We don't have to wait too long to find out.
Yeah, you're taking the place of iOS Today.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry that you're coming in on Monday to record that show instead of doing it in normal time.
That's okay.
But you can blame Google, just like I do.
Yeah, I will.
Blame Google for everything. That's what I do.
Burke says it starts at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Thank you, Burke. I appreciate that. 10 a.m. Pacific next Tuesday. We'll be doing live coverage, Leo and I, of that keynote. So there you go. We'll see you then. Tech News Weekly records live every Thursday starting at 11 a.m. Pacific at twit.tv/live. You can be part of the show by emailing us at tnw@twit.tv.
Subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNW and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us wherever we are, except on the street. Don't follow us on the street. But
don't do that, please.
If you want to tweet at me, it's a lot like following me on the street, and just do that. I'm at Megan Morrone.
And I'm at Jason Howell. Thanks to everyone who's helping us out today. Burke, thanks to Alex. Jammer B was in here. So many more people help us. John?
Two
yes?
Johns?
Yes, we've got two Johns.
Yeah.
We're like John Rich today.
We are. We're full of Johns.
Full of... Thanks to everyone who helps us out each and every week, and thanks to you for watching. We'll see you next week on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.